My message to the world is that we have to use what we have at hand to actually rehabilitate the reef. Coral reef is a life-giving environment, meaning that if they die, we are in trouble. And the ocean is in trouble. When the ocean is in trouble, we are in a very difficult situation. It all started 11 years ago here in Perhentian Island, Malaysia. It basically, in this bay, there's just water, sand and rocks. And after 11 years, the coral propagation research has created this reef where people come and snorkel and dive, and it's actually benefiting the local community here. And to get such result, I worked without funding. It was difficult, and to be able to sustain, I work as a dive master, and also sometimes I sell drinks on the beach with my pet monkey named Abu. The research is the main reason I am here, and the reason I choose Perhentian Island also because of the job available and the environment that is right for the research. So even though I did not get any funding for this project, I still continue on throughout the years because I believe this coral propagation project can make a difference, not just here, but throughout the region where coral reefs are degrading in a very rapid pace, and we need a project that's effective to counter this destruction. Before we actually succeed with the coral propagation, I did a lot of experiments. One of the experiments is the use of PVC pipe structures. The PVC pipe structures are not readily accepted by coral to grow on it, and it's very difficult to get them to survive on the pipe. The second disadvantage is that PVC pipe only lasts about 8 years. After 8 years, it starts to crumble and pushed by the current and get piled up somewhere, and it looks like a rubbish dump. The second type of coral propagation, or basically artificial reef, is called a cheese block. The cheese block is made of concrete which is treated so that the pH of the concrete and seawater is almost the same, so that to enhance coral growth onto it. There is no problem with the structure except that it is costly. The big ones is about 25,000 US dollars. Finally, the third structure that we experiment is the steel structure. It is possible to grow coral on steel structure, but still, because of the visible structure is not attractive, it is not possible to actually sell a location filled with steel structures, even though there's coral growing on it, as a tourism product. In the end, we have to experiment with natural rock. It attracts more life compared to the other experiments. I do different experiments in different locations as well. So as the other researchers, they also do their own approach according to the geographical location. So there's no one system that is successful in all locations. I just came up from the last dive at the site where I planted coral 11 years ago. I was really happy and to see all the corals and thriving and fishes and living things are feeding inside it. I basically live for this project. I live for this project. I work in the ocean. I research the ocean. I teach people about the ocean, and I hope that what I have done will benefit everybody in this area. I'm Anwar Abdullah, and I was selected to be the ADEX Coral Reef Ambassador. With that recognition, I am able to reach more people and travel to more countries to be able to do my project. Basically, the whole idea just exploded. People from all over the world is asking me, how do you do it? How do you do it? And how do you do it? And I didn't know how I'm going to do it because I have not yet created the education system. So I worked the entire 4 months in the end of 2013, day and night, to produce the education system. And then I created the textbook, and I copyrighted, and I sent my invention, the catalyst, for patent. And I also patented the technique and everything that, and then from there on it becomes official that it is a program. The course is actually 3 levels. This is the 1-day workshop. This is the 5-day course. The 5-day course allows you to do more types of corals rather than just the staghorn. Here you can handle the staghorn coral successfully, and here you handle up to 66 species of coral with this system. And then the next level is to become a trainer. Why? Because previously when we started, we just teach local people how to do it, and when they get the catalyst and they get the glue, they thought they can do anything with it. And then they start to do on their own without following the proper procedures. They actually kill more corals than doing good. The coral propagation program is actually a very well structured education program that is designed to educate people, even children, how the coral propagation system is run. Actually, it is for everybody. It is simplified. It is more like teaching people how to garden coral. So this tiny little thing is sitting in that hole, right? It's sitting in that hole. So this skeleton is called a corallite. That is the most scientific part you will learn. Don't worry about it, right? All throughout the world, people are dependent on scientists to get the coral conservation going. I work the other way around. I use my science to let people do it by themselves. The degradation is speeding up. That is why we need to also speed up on the conservation part. Degradation comes in all angles. Everywhere coral is dying, but there is no one reason. There's many reasons. So when ocean becomes acidic, it weakens the skeleton of coral, and you see a lot of coral topple over for no reason because their skeleton becomes weak. When your skeleton becomes weak, if we ourselves, our skeleton becomes weak, we can hardly stand up, you know? So that's the same thing. In other locations, there are other causes of problem with the reefs. Like in Brunei, for example, their biggest problem is pollution. The pollution from the rivers coming into the ocean is killing the coral. Sometimes you see a lot of algae growing. It's because a lot of phosphate is seeping through from the water table up into the ocean. The source of phosphate normally is from pollution, or sometimes because you are volcanic. Your rocks is volcanic. When the rock is slowly dissolving in the water, they also have phosphate in it. There is other factors of coral damage. One of the biggest one is also caused by men. Coral can be damaged by people, snorkelers who use like sunscreen. It's not the chemical contact with the corals that damage the coral or kill the coral. The chemical actually make viruses and bacteria awaken from dormant. There's many dormant viruses and bacteria in the sea. They are not active, but when it comes in contact with the chemical from the sunscreen, they cause this bacteria to become active. When the bacteria become active, it starts to attack the weak part of the coral or the currently sick part of the coral and make the disease even worse. I see. Another cause of damage to the coral reef is the increase of seawater temperature. Okay. When the seawater temperature increase above 31 degrees for a prolonged period, like more than 1 week or 2 weeks, this higher temperature will cause the coral to start bleaching. All is against the odds of the coral reef regeneration. That is why if we seed coral, if we propagate coral as many as possible, at least we create chances of recovering. Although the research that produce it is scientific, but the content of the propagation program itself is never scientific. It is more like teaching people how to garden coral. I think in the world, people are concerned about coral reef, but yet they don't know what to do about it. And I want a lot of people to be able to plant coral as coral gardening. If we don't populate the reef now, then we have no chances. We have absolutely no chances. The locations of our program is based on many factors. Bohol, for example, was hit by earthquake in October 2013, and a few weeks later it was hit by a typhoon, and at that time the reef is really affected by the typhoon because it arrives at our shores during low tide, and it caused a lot of damage. And therefore, I think it is critical that we help them grow back the coral here. Besides the natural disaster, these reefs here in this area here is at risk of disease. I've seen evidence of outbreak of coral enemies like the Dropelia shell. When the Dropelia shell eats coral, they release enzyme which is infectious to the coral. but the enzyme they leave behind will cause infection to the rest of the colony, and eventually the whole colony will die, which is very serious. This is the natural threat, and therefore I think it is critical that we help them grow back the coral here. That's not the only enemy they have. There's many enemies, but the shell is one of the serious ones. Now we have to make some control over the shells. Try not to fish out your triggerfish, yeah, because that's the only predator for the shell. Triggerfish is the natural enemy for this, and most house reef, because the triggerfish is taken out for the safety of divers. Yeah, some areas they actually hunt them to take them out of the house reef, because when people are kneeling on the sand trying to do mass clearing, suddenly a triggerfish right in front of them. It's not funny, you know. But the truth is, triggerfish, the ocean is the triggerfish home. We are only there. We are only visitors, you know. I've seen evidence of coral disease, but I've not seen the crown of thorns here, like other reefs in Asia. When the coral is weak or beginning to get sick, it quickly go and eat it. It's actually very useful, but the number has to be controlled. If there are too many, you have to reduce their number, but you cannot have zero of them. If you have zero of them, you have zero doctors in your reef, because they recognize which coral is sick. They eat them before the sickness spread to the other corals. You have to understand that not everything is destructive. The most destructive thing to the reef is man. Tourism by far is the biggest income giving to the local community on islands around Southeast Asia. But because of lack of education in most areas, tourism has been made into a destructive activity. Most of the areas are still practicing the bad tourism without realizing it. Mainly it's because the awareness is not there. There are too many tourists in a small place, too many boats in one bay, which pollute the reef with oil and everything, and which is killing the environment. They do scuba diving without proper training, and they damage the reefs, or any other kind of activity. There are still many things to do with tourism that needs to be done in a good way. Basically, island tourism is dependent on the reef. Without the reef, without the marine life, there is no business. They come to island because they want the ocean. But if the ocean is dead, the tourism is dead. Most of the time, people will not want to come to those areas because most corals is devastated or dead, or there's nothing left, almost. There's nothing left. When we have those kind of areas, it is non-productive to the community. It's not providing any source of income. It is not providing any source of food. The community part of this program is to increase the standard of living of islanders.
During the day, the corals more or less, they look like stones or plants because we cannot really see the animals, they're sleeping, because corals are actually night active. The coral reef will slowly die because new corals cannot settle down anymore because there's grass already, everywhere.
The young generation is the component of the community that will carry long-term impact to coral conservation. Some children are privileged to have the opportunity to take part in scuba diving. Less fortunate children can also take part through contribution from corporate sponsorship. The fun and excitement part of every child's learning will have profound impact in strengthening their awareness about coral reef conservation. The coral propagation program that includes children have the element of science, play, and practice. They are not confined to books, but instead guided through hands-on activity. It is a comprehensive learning experience that gives them the feeling of becoming a scientist and that they will pursue this field in the future. All this is created with only one goal: to instill knowledge and interest in coral conservation. And because they are young, these children will have many years ahead to be active and help spread the awareness for coral conservation. When the coral reef here is rehabilitated, there is also potential for another industry that is thriving in all other touristic islands in Southeast Asia, which is snorkeling. If there is coral reef that is restored, if there's living thing there, people will visit there by snorkeling, and they will create another income to the local community here to earn a living. The best way to teach a coral propagation program to a local community is first to understand the dynamics of their living. So I come and work with the local people, especially those who are at home, mainly the wives, and I taught them how to do coral propagation. And by the end of the first year, when the coral starts to grow, fishes start to come to their new coral garden. You can see now more marine life like turtles start coming back to their little garden. And from there onwards, I start to promote to the local hotels snorkeling trips, and they will come to the man-made coral garden. There are many ways of propagating coral. I choose this way of coral propagation because, number one, the substrate that I use is natural rock. If I cut the cost factor down by using natural rock, there are many people who are willing to do it because it's free. And therefore, I can get more people around the world to propagate coral, and the scale of propagation become much larger as compared to any other techniques. The main target is to get people interested in planting coral, basically. Propagating means like planting seeds of coral, and then when it grows, we use that to spread more of those species Some people thought that coral fragging is so simple that they can get the glue and get some catalyst and they will go on the seaside, they go snorkeling, they pick up some corals from the live healthy colony and they break it apart and then they stick it onto the rocks and they put it in the ocean, they will grow. It's not that simple. In ideal conditions, I've seen them grow about 15 centimeters a year. The growth rate is very dependent on how much sun is getting, how deep you put it, what kind of current is bringing the food to them, and also will there be any enemies around. Even sometimes if you have a coral nursery, you cannot stop a turtle from resting on your corals. They swim around there and it's their home. The coral reef is an important ecosystem which provides two basic criteria for living things. One is shelter, the other one is food. And when there's food, there's energy. When there's energy, there's reproduction. And living things can multiply that way. Unlike the natural reef, artificial reef don't produce food. It becomes a temporary shelter, yes, when an organism comes to it and shelter from predators, but eventually it has to go away from it to find food. And that means all artificial structures mainly are temporary shelter to living things. This reef here, it was damaged by typhoon a few years ago. Shortly after, they put this artificial reef. That means this artificial reef is more than a year old, whereas this rock was damaged about a year and a half old. But you can see coral has already started growing on the natural rocks here. And these corals are about 7 to 8 months, according to the size that we can see. We can estimate that it's about 7-8 months. That means the natural rock here is readily accepted by the coral to grow, whereas the artificial reef did not have any of the coral growth on it. Instead, it's just barnacles and shellfish. Coral is living thing. They spawn, they live, they reproduce, but they also become food. When they spawn, their eggs join the part of the zooplankton in the ocean that feeds the whale shark and fusilliers and plankton feeders on top. And when they settle down, they also feed the bottom feeders like the sea urchin. So everything in and around the reef relies on corals. If we can rehabilitate corals and we do it well, the environment will be able to provide by itself again. They couldn't sustain because we have been cutting off the cycle. So now it's time to propagate coral to recreate the cycle again. Whatever we know now, use it and be active in coral restoration. Because basically, coral reef is a life-bearing environment, it's a life-giving environment. Meaning that if they die, we are in trouble. And the ocean is in trouble. When the ocean is in trouble, we are in a very difficult situation.